the Yankees, I think that's the only thing that's really going right for them right now is this bullpen. Talk about fifth in the AL, worst team, in the whole, AL right now. And that's something that is tough for a team that was supposed to be at the top. 5-8 starts. So obviously only 3 games under. They definitely have a lot of time to come back, but it's been just tough because of the way they've lost ways. And I feel like every way imaginable, you have the new rules kind of screwing them over with the 7 innings. You had the extra innings where the runner on second had, early on, the starting pitching hasn't been good. Really, it's only been Cole. Kind of reminds me of the Mets last year where you had DeGrom and nothing behind him. Now you have Cole and nothing behind them. So, I mean, those are kind of the biggest worries. And I think, the hitting's also been inconsistent. The big stat for me is they already have over 100 Ks in 13 games. That's something that, when you leave runners on base and you need to have some clutch hits, over 100 Ks is just not going to cut it. And, those are the things I think for the Yankees. Like the hitting, I think will turn it around. That's why I want to start with the starting pitching, because that's been the worry, not only just this year, not only just this offseason. It's really been it forever. I feel like when the Yankees have had this run here, and it seems like it's after Cole, it's continuing to, kind of falter right now. So Ryan, resident Yankee fan, want to start off with you. I want to take your temperature right now. How are you feeling about this Yankees team here in the first 13 games?
Yeah, I'm hot. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm pretty hot here. Before I kind of go into, how bad the rotation's been, I do think if we're going to talk about how good Taillon Walker has been through too, I think Jordan Montgomery, he has been the one guy behind Cole who has looked comparable. And he had some big starts. He had a big one versus the Blue Jays in a game they had to win. But you talked about this year, the seventh inning stuff. And I feel like, we're 10 games into the year. And there's already been 3 games where I've been like, that's the worst loss of the year. That's the worst loss of the year. And they keep coming. And, it's the way they're losing these games as you talked about, because the hitting has not been there. And that is always frustrating, when you see your team not hitting. But that is something that I think we all expect to turn it around, right? This lineup has as much talent as anyone in baseball. Aaron Judge has been killing it. And besides that, it's been kind of slow. So I do think that will turn around 100%. Not too worried there. And then, where I get hot and where I get nervous for this team long term is the rotation, because they made the decision this offseason that instead of, for whatever reason, they had to get under the luxury tax. It's the state of the game. That's a whole nother conversation. And they had about $15 million to spend. And, they could have got a guy like Tanaka back. Obviously, they went the route of going 2 for 1. And normally I would be all for that because depth is so important, especially during a whole 162 game season. You're going to have injuries. But the guys they brought in, it was Kluber and Taillon. And so Kluber was always a flyer because obviously he pitched 1 inning last year. He's been up and down the last few years. But there was real optimism that he would turn it around. In spring, he looked great. Eric Cressy, who is now in the Yankees health department, has been with Kluber forever. He's trained with him in the offseason. So there was a connection there, and there was trust that he could get Kluber back to what he was. And I know it's only 2 starts, and obviously things can change. But a guy like Kluber, you needed him to pitch well out of the gate because, there's expectation. I think we talked about this in the pre-show. You thought he'd come out, he'd pitch well, he'd kind of tail off at the end of the year as the age and the innings get up to him. But he just hasn't looked good at all so far. He hasn't got past the 4th inning, 6.1 ERA in 3 starts, got rocked his last time out. And that really is concerning because the Yankees were trusting 2 guys in him and Taillon, who pitched a combined 1 inning last year, to make up a bulk of this rotation. And Taillon, I don't want to kill yet because I think, he's coming back from Tommy John. It's only 2 starts. And one of them, he really made 2 bad pitches the whole game. So I do think it's too early to kind of, flip out on him. But Kluber has been a big concern. I watch him and I'm just not impressed with the stuff he's had. So, at the end of the day, we know Cole is going to dominate, right? I think weirdly enough, he's still chasing that Cy Young. I think he's looking at a strong case this year, 1.47 ERA through 3 starts. But the Yankees need more than that. If a guy like Montgomery is going to step up, you need some of these guys you brought in to be that number 2 to do it. So Kluber, Taillon, they're going to need them to work out. Herman has already been sent down, so that experiment pretty much already failed, which is concerning. And so, yeah, the state of the Yankees, it's early. I'm not too happy. I'm not crazy worried. But this rotation, as we talk about the Yankees, your expectations are to win a championship, it's championship or bust. And I get that. And, it should be the case when you're spending the money you are. And right now, I don't feel great about that with this rotation. You're going to need more. Obviously, I don't want to start speculating for the deadline, but I would be shocked if they go into the playoffs, if they can make the playoffs with this rotation, because it's not where it needs to be right now. And at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I mean, a guy you didn't mention, I think, is Severino, and he could be a big option for this rotation. I mean, but my point, I guess, starting at the top with Garrett Cole. I mean, I started with DeGrom for the Mets, so looking at some sort of optimism here for the Yankees. Garrett Cole is it right now. He's your optimism. Every time he takes the mound, you feel like you have a good chance to win if you're a Yankees fan, if you're a Yankees player, and that's huge. I mean, that's awesome to have an ace like that. Definitely a Cy Young contender. I think he's got a good chance to take that in the American League. But then you have certainly a lot of question marks outside of it. I mean, Ryan, you talked about Kluber and Taillon. Those are big ones. Those are guys that, I mean, from taking them in this offseason, I was certainly critical just because of the fact that neither of them have pitched a lot. Kluber, obviously, kind of up there in age. And I think Andrew, like Ryan, you mentioned, made a great point just about how Kluber, you expected him to start well and then kind of ease off. And the fact that he's not playing well right now off the jump is, I would say, extremely concerning for this staff, because my thought process is between Taillon and Kluber, I would say you kind of need one of them to work out at least. I mean, obviously both would be nice, but I'd say you could take maybe Taillon working out or maybe Kluber working out, although that seems unlikely. But let's say Taillon finds it, figures it out. He could be like a number 3 guy behind Cole. And then you said Montgomery, he's very consistent, very reliable. And then Severino, you can throw him into the mix. Hopefully, as a Yankees fan, you got to hope that when he comes back, he's going to be reliable and he's going to be at least somewhat like his older self, although you can't exactly expect him to be exactly like he used to be. But for me, that's just, when I'm saying all this, I can't even I don't know. I feel like I can't convince anyone with that. I mean, it's just a ton of question marks surrounding this entire staff. And that's why I hope for Yankees fans that they do go out and get somebody at the deadline, because that's going to definitely help this rotation. They need it. Just like we talked about the Mets bullpen. The Yankees, I don't think they can go into the playoffs with the rotation looking like it is right now. I mean, Severino could come up, step up. Montgomery will be good and Cole will be good, but you need another guy there. It could be Taillon, but I think certainly you could look towards the trade deadline and find somebody there. I'm sure there's someone available down the road for the Yankees to go and get. And I think Cashman might go and get that arm that they kind of need, because for me, I mentioned this when we were talking about the Mets, this lineup just has a ton of pressure on it to really produce. And I think, I think there's no question about it that this lineup will turn things around. I mean, it's way too early. And some of these guys certainly have been underperforming, to say the least. I mean, Brett Gardner, it should not be your everyday center fielder or left fielder in this lineup. No offense to Brett Gardner, but you have guys like Aaron Hicks that haven't been hitting. I mean, Aaron Judge hitting, that's big. It's nice to have him back. I mean, Stanton hasn't been hitting. Gleyber Torres has been struggling. I mean, you could just go down the list of basically this entire depth chart and point a couple guys that you think, okay, these guys have been playing very well offensively. So for me, I don't worry about that too much, but I think early on it might just be a sign of the fact that there's a lot of pressure around this lineup to produce a lot, especially when this starting rotation just doesn't seem to have it.
This rotation for the Yankees, I've seen this movie before, and it was just last year with the Mets, because you had Zach Wheeler, great pitcher, just like Tanaka, reliable. I don't think they're an ace, but I think they're a solid number 2, solid number 3, and they leave, and then you replace them with a Rick Porcello and a Michael Wacha. And Rick Porcello was your veteran in there, won a Cy Young, and it blew up in the Mets' faces. Michael Wacha got hurt, and he had some success with the Cardinals, had some solid years. Same with Taillon, and then it just blew up in their face. They didn't even have a Montgomery, so maybe the Yankees are even better than that, but I mean, who knows? I mean, it's only been 3 starts for him. You said it's only been a few starts for Taillon. You could say the same for Montgomery, who, again, I think it's a good story. So I think he's looked really good, but I wouldn't say he's like the full, solidifying there as a number 2 starter. And you look at beyond that, you really got nothing right now. And Severino, you don't know how he's going to come back. I've seen waiting for pitchers. You could be waiting forever for this guy to come back and pitch well. And that's just stuff that it really concerns you, because you're going to need someone beyond Cole in the playoffs. And when you face teams, I mean, you talk about like a team like the Mets, or I know they're in the National League, but still. And I think a team in the AL, I think it's wide open. I think someone's going to add at the deadline, and they're going to probably get a big ace. And, hopefully for the Yankees' sake, it's them and they really get now they have like a Cole on another ace. And maybe that's what Cashman was thinking all along, because really besides Bauer, and even Bauer, he's a question mark in his own right, but there wasn't like a ace out there to get. There wasn't a Garrett Cole out there to get. So maybe he's like, let me wait until the deadline where we already see, maybe you could pick up a hot pitcher. Like the Astros did that with Verlander when he was available and they were able to get him, and that propelled them, to a deep playoff runs, multiple deep playoff runs. And, I feel like that's what the Yankees will probably have to do right now. And it's just like, I didn't like the move for Kluber and Taillon when it happened. And, early on, I still don't like it. And like, that's something that for Yankees fans, and like, I am holding them to a high bar because they're the New York Yankees. And I expect the New York Yankees not to take flyers. I expect them to get the big guys. And, whether that be through trades or, free agency, that's the one thing that, worried me, that they were looking like the Wilpons out there getting, a guy like Kluber and not getting the Bauer or whoever it may be, the Carrasco's out there that, the Mets were interested in. But that's just kind of my 2 cents on, this Yankees rotation. And you go to the hitting, I think the hitting will come around just because you have a lot of home run hitters. They're going to start hitting home runs. You talk about, you still have LeMahieu, Urshela, all those guys. I think they'll start, ends up hitting. I'm not too worried about that just because you have a ton of talent there. In this rotation, you don't have a lot of talent. That's, I think, the most worrisome thing. I mean, and that's where I think, this Yankees team kind of plays out. That's why I think they'll probably still win the division. It's just when you look to the playoffs, when you need a pitcher beyond, Garrett Cole, it'll be interesting to see, if they can go get that guy now in the trade deadline, and that may define their season.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan, I just wanted to hop in real quick on what Andrew is saying there. I think I totally agree with you that coming into this season, the primary explanation of getting Taillon and Kluber was, the American League is not as good as it used to be. And to me, that's just almost setting you up for failure. I mean, this Yankees team, I think a lot of people are very hard on them. And I would say I would include myself as someone that's very hard on this team, but that's just because we all know the potential that this team has. We all know that this team the goal should be getting to the World Series. I mean, that's been a goal for, I'd say, at least a couple years, if not more. It seems like it's always a goal for this Yankees organization is to make a deep playoff run. But especially now, there seems to be just a sense of urgency where it's like, okay, we have to find a way to get to the World Series. Or it seems like, I don't know, maybe they make some changes in that managerial position there. But that's why I think these moves just, for me, seem so lackluster, because the Yankees and their thought process should be getting to the World Series. That should be a goal for the team this year.
Yeah. Just something, you talked about how I didn't bring up Severino earlier. And that's because with the last few years, it's been like the saying has been, we get this guy back from injury. That's our deadline acquisition. I didn't bring that up because I think that's unacceptable, because you don't know with Tommy John. It is a process. This could be pushed back forever. You have Clark Schmidt right now also, who was supposed to make this rotation. He's been dealing with arm issues all year. He's supposed to be back by opening day. He may not come back all year. You just don't know. I think they have to be aggressive. We've seen in the past, Cashman has not been willing to give up the prospects. He just hasn't, for whatever reason. Obviously, a lot of them have came up and hit, and that's been great. But at some point, you're going to have to go all in, every chip in the table. Not saying they're not doing that, but I think that's why, we are so hard on them right now, is because of how all in they are. You expect them to get to a World Series. It's year 4, I think, where, Brian Cashman called this team, Operation Death Star, where he traded for Stan and the expectations were sky high, and they still have not lived up to them. So I do think you're going to have to do something there. I don't think this team right now, as constructed, is a World Series team at all. Not a chance. We've seen the situational hitting has to improve. The lineup has to improve. The starting rotation has to improve.